My name is Vanessa Cole, and 3 months ago my older brother yelled across a country club parking lot, "Don't come back here until you learn how to represent our family." He was pointing at my car, a slightly dented 2012 Ford Focus I'd had since college. His words didn't sting because they were loud. They stung because he meant every syllable. And everyone standing nearby, my parents, my sister, the club staff, just watched. No one stepped in. That night, something inside me went still. You know that feeling when you realize your presence is tolerated but never respected, that your value is measured by the shine on your shoes or the emblem on your grill? I stood there clutching my car keys, while my brother Sean gestured toward a row of luxury vehicles, his black Tesla, my sister Thanham's Lexus, even my father's antique convertible. I looked at my car, then I looked at them, and I didn't say a word. Not then. It wasn't the first time Sean humiliated me in public, but it was the first time I let the silence answer him. Maybe because I knew what he didn't. Maybe because I had spent a decade building something he couldn't imagine. Maybe because I finally understood that respect doesn't come from fighting for approval. It comes from knowing your own worth even when the world mislabels you. As he scoffed and turned away, I didn't chase after his approval. I got in my car and drove home. But before I turned the key, I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror and whispered to myself, let them laugh, let them talk, but when the time comes, let them follow. Because the truth is, I've been called the disappointment, the lost cause, the one who settled. And yet I've built an empire behind that embarrassing car. I've signed contracts worth more than their entire real estate portfolios. And I've given away more in scholarships than they've earned in annual income. But they never asked, because they thought they already knew. They didn't. And that's what this story is really about. It's not about revenge. It's not even about redemption. It's about what happens when the world misjudges quiet success, when substance is mistaken for failure, and appearances become the only currency people trust. So if you've ever been underestimated because of how you look, what you wear, or the car you drive, this story is for you. If you've ever walked into a room and felt small just because your path didn't match someone else's definition of success, stay with me, because this isn't just my story. It's every quiet builder, every underestimated dreamer, every black sheep who turned out to be the shepherd. This is about owning your space even when no one claps for you yet. If you've ever been on the receiving end of someone's condescension just because you didn't play the game their way, hit that like button and stay with me. The next chapter might just feel like your own. My brother Sean didn't always look at me like I was some charity case in need of rescue. There was a time years ago when we were just siblings running through the backyard with grass-stained knees and chasing fireflies after dinner. But somewhere between his MBA and his first 7-figure salary, he stopped seeing me as Vanessa. I became the one who never quite got it together. To be fair, Sean had every external marker of success. He worked as an executive for a commercial real estate firm in downtown Dallas, drove a Tesla Model S with custom leather seats, and hosted cocktail parties on the rooftop of his high-rise apartment. My younger sister Lacey followed a similar path, married into wealth, opened an interior design studio in Highland Park, and curated an Instagram feed that looked like a magazine cover. And me, I ran a small but growing educational tech initiative out of a converted warehouse on the outskirts of Oak Cliff. I didn't have a flashy office or a receptionist. I didn't even have employees in the traditional sense, just a small group of collaborators spread across the country working remotely on a platform we believed could change how underfunded schools teach STEM. My clothes were simple, my shoes were sensible, and I drove the same Ford Focus I bought in college after scraping together a down payment tutoring part-time. In my family, that made me confusing. At every holiday dinner, the same questions circled the table like clockwork. So Vanessa, are you still doing that tech project? My mom would ask her fork, lingering midair like she wasn't sure whether I was a hobbyist or a problem. Sean would chime in with a half smile. You know, if you ever want to transition into something real, I could make some calls for you. Commercial real estate needs bright minds. And Lacey, ever the diplomat, would offer her favorite passive-aggressive suggestion. Maybe you could partner with some of those educational nonprofits, just until things stabilize. They didn't know I had already secured long-term funding from a private donor. They didn't know we had contracts pending with 3 public school districts in Texas and early-stage talks with a national charter network. They didn't know I'd just been nominated for an award in educational innovation. But then again, they never asked. Because in their minds, success had a specific costume, a tailored suit, a leased luxury vehicle, and a business card with a recognizable logo. I had none of that. What I had was belief, grit. Late nights writing code until my eyes stung, weekends spent visiting classrooms to pilot our software, and a tiny storage room in my warehouse where I cried in private when a grant fell through. No one at the country club ever saw that part. Maybe they wouldn't care if they did. But I cared. Because while Sean and Lacey were climbing ladders, I was building scaffolding, something that would hold up others, not just myself. I didn't measure my days in dollars or square footage. I measured them in the number of kids who learned to code that week, in the number of schools that stopped relying on outdated systems, in the emails from teachers saying, "You made it easier, you made it work." Still, I knew how I looked to them, like someone stuck, someone scraping by. And I won't lie, some days their judgment gnawed at me. But I also knew the truth, I wasn't behind. I was just choosing a different finish line. And I wasn't alone. There are thousands of people like me quietly building futures that don't fit into glossy brochures. So if you've ever sat across from relatives who couldn't see the worth in what you do, just know, your value doesn't need their permission. You get to define it. You get to live it even if no one claps for you yet. And sometimes staying quiet isn't weakness, it's strategy. Because when the moment comes, silence can be the loudest mic drop of all. The night at the country club wasn't supposed to go that way. It was my father's birthday, his 68th. We were all expected to dress nicely, smile politely, and pretend everything was perfect, just like we did every year. The Riverside Terrace Club was their preferred gathering spot, complete with white linen tables, live piano music, and a waitstaff that remembered every family's usual. I pulled into the parking lot right on time, my Ford Focus humming quietly beneath the sea of glossy Cadillacs and Audis. I stepped out, smoothing my plain navy dress, clutching the small envelope I had written Dad's card in, handwritten, of course. As I approached the front entrance, I saw Sean standing with a scotch in one hand and a smirk already forming as he looked in my direction. "You're brave showing up in that thing," he said, nodding toward my car like it carried disease. I tried to smile. It gets me where I need to go. "Yeah, like 10 years in the past," he laughed, then walked in without another word. I stood there for a moment, letting the shame wash over me like cold water. My shoes suddenly felt wrong. My dress felt too plain. And the envelope in my hand, sincere, thoughtful, felt small compared to the Tiffany bag Lacey was carrying inside. But I followed them in anyway, because I had learned long ago that presence itself can be defiance. At the dinner table, things unraveled fast. Mom opened with her usual, "Vanessa, you're not thinking of doing that coding thing full-time again, are you?" Lacey didn't wait. "She already is, Mom. Didn't you see her LinkedIn? She runs a tech project that helps schools or something." Sean leaned back in his chair, swirling his drink. "Let's be honest, what she does is basically advanced babysitting with a laptop." Everyone laughed. Even Dad, though his laugh sounded more tired than amused. I didn't interrupt. I just let them keep talking. Because I knew they weren't actually trying to understand me. They were trying to reduce me to fit me neatly into the story they told about me. A story where I was the one who chose the small life. The one who meant well but never quite made it. The one who didn't bring honor to the family name. And every time they mocked my choices, they strengthened that version of the story, not just for themselves, but for anyone listening. Then came the real blow. Sean leaned forward, his voice loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. "Vanessa, do you even make enough to file taxes?" Lacey gasped between giggles, Sean. But no one told him to stop. Not even Dad. They didn't see the waitress pause as she set down the water pitcher. They didn't notice how my hand clenched beneath the table, or how I blinked twice just to hold back tears that refused to fall. What they didn't understand, what they refused to understand, was that I had stopped defending myself years ago. Not because they were right, but because I realized arguing with them was like arguing with a mirror that refused to reflect anything deeper than the surface. So I said nothing. But inside a fire was building, quiet, steady, burning through every insult, every dismissal, every joke at my expense. Not rage, not vengeance, something more dangerous. Resolve. Because deep down I knew that this was the last time they'd look at me and see only what I didn't have. The last time they'd laugh without knowing who they were laughing at. And if you've ever sat through a dinner where every smile was a cut and every compliment came laced with pity, if you've ever felt invisible in a room full of people who share your last name, then you already know. You don't need to shout to reclaim your story. You just need to outgrow the room they built for you. silently, unapologetically, and when the time is right, walk them straight into the truth. It was somewhere between the creme brulee and the second round of drinks that my mother decided to stage what she thought was an intervention. She reached across the table and gently touched my hand, her eyes soft, almost maternal, until she opened her mouth. "Sweetheart," she began the way you might speak to someone who's just lost a job or a spouse. "We're not criticizing you, we're concerned." Sean nodded, napkin draped over one knee, the edge of his Rolex gleaming as he sipped his bourbon. "You're 32, Vanessa. At your age, I was closing million-dollar deals before breakfast." "And I had already opened my third showroom," Lacey chimed in, tossing her freshly curled hair over one shoulder. Mom leaned in. "We just don't want to see you stuck. You have potential, but you're wasting it on passion projects. It's time to think about retirement investments, your future." I looked around the table. My father, who had built a modest logistics company and now spent most days golfing, said nothing. He was too busy swirling his glass of wine and avoiding eye contact. For years, they had painted me as the passionate one, the idealistic daughter. They said it like it was charming at first, something that would burn out like a phase. But when it didn't, when I didn't come to them asking for a bailout or begging for introductions, that charm turned into irritation. Because what they couldn't explain, they chose to belittle. Because what didn't fit into their framework of success made them uncomfortable. "You could be so much more," my mother whispered. I'd heard that phrase so many times, it used to bother me. Now it just sounded like a riddle. More than what? More than building a platform currently used by over 600,000 students across the Midwest. More than leading a remote team of 20 educators and developers, reshaping how coding is taught in underserved communities. More than securing my own funding, making payroll every month, and managing operations with zero family connections or trust funds. But they didn't know any of that, because they never asked. Because to them, I wasn't building something. I was playing CEO until I got tired and came home. Sean leaned forward again, elbows on the table, his voice low and clipped. "Here's what you need to do. Apply to one of the consulting firms I know. You've got brains, Vanessa, just no direction." Lacey added, "And update your wardrobe. Seriously. If you want people to take you seriously, you can't dress like you're still doing college internships." That's when I felt the shift in my chest. Not heartbreak, not sadness, something colder. Detachment. They weren't trying to help me. They were trying to reprogram me into someone palatable for cocktail parties and country club brunches. "Thank you for the advice," I said quietly. But in my head, I was already writing a different script. Not one where I begged for validation. One where I let my results speak in silence. Because here's the thing, they never understood I had chosen this path. Deliberately. I wasn't lost. I wasn't struggling. I was building quietly, carefully, and without the need for applause. And I wasn't going to explain it anymore. So I finished my water, smiled, folded my napkin into a neat triangle, and waited. Because sometimes letting people underestimate you is the most strategic decision you'll ever make. And when the time comes to reveal the truth about who you are, what you've built, and where you're going, the silence that follows will be the loudest moment of your life. Especially when the very people who doubted you have no choice but to listen. I wasn't surprised when it happened. As we stepped out into the cool night air, the valet returned my keys and pulled up my old Ford Focus, dusty, faded in places, and humming softly as if apologizing for not being something flashier. My mother glanced away. Lacey actually winced, and Sean predictably seized the moment. He raised his voice loud enough for several nearby club members to hear. "Vanessa, for God's sake, this is embarrassing. You pull up in that tin can while we're parked next to Range Rovers and Teslas." I blinked at him. The valet froze, unsure if he should hand me the keys. Sean stepped closer, ignoring the stares. "This is exactly what we're talking about. You have no awareness, no pride. I wouldn't let my assistant drive that thing, and you're pulling into Riverside like this. Either get a real car or stop showing up here." Silence swept over the valet circle. Someone from another family, the Carsons, I think, turned their head. A couple in evening wear exchanged glances. I felt my breath shallow, like I was shrinking under a spotlight I never asked for. But this time I didn't flinch. I took the keys. "I'll see you next time," I said simply, my voice steady. Sean scoffed. "If there is a next time." I got in, closed the door, and drove away. But that drive home, that was the beginning of everything. Because something in me cracked wide open. Not out of anger, but out of clarity. It wasn't just that my family didn't respect me. It was that they had no idea who I really was. Not one of them had ever asked about my work beyond the surface. Not one of them had taken the time to understand what I was building, why I drove the car I did, or where I chose to invest my energy. They had made an image of me and locked me inside it, and I had let them, until now. As I drove through the city past downtown Dallas over the Trinity River into my neighborhood, I stopped seeing the streetlights and started seeing the plan. I saw the long weeks I'd spent negotiating back-end contracts with school districts. I saw the late-night Zoom calls with developers in other time zones. I saw the moment I wired the down payment on a new pilot program for kids in underserved schools. And then I saw Sean's Porsche headlights appear in my rearview mirror. I almost laughed. He was following me. He hadn't finished his lecture. I pulled into my driveway, the old tires of my Focus crunching softly on the pavers. My house was quiet, unassuming. 2 stories, white siding, blue shutters, a front porch with a single rocking chair. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine paid in full. Sean parked right behind me. I stepped out and turned to face him. "Emma," he said immediately, stepping closer, already annoyed. We weren't done talking. "You need to start making some better choices." I raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" He gestured at the house. "This place is fine, as a starter home. But you've been here for 4 years. When are you going to level up, build equity, show some growth?" I folded my arms. "I own this house outright." "That's not the point," he snapped. "The point is optics, momentum. You're not projecting success, Vanessa. You look like you're barely scraping by." I took a long breath. Then I smiled. "You want proof of success?" He hesitated. "Yes. Follow me," because this was the moment I had been waiting for. Not to prove myself, but to shift the story completely. To show that the woman they called embarrassing was in fact the one carrying the legacy they were too blind to see. And if you've ever had to stay silent while someone tore you down, waiting for the right moment to rise, leave a comment. Tell me about it. Because there's a power in holding your truth until the world is forced to see it. I didn't say another word, just turned on my heel and walked toward the garage at the side of the house. Sean followed. Of course he always followed when he thought he had the upper hand. His footsteps crunched behind me on the paver path, his tone shifting from condescending to skeptical. "Vanessa, if this is about showing me your laptop or your little workspace, I pressed the key fob. The garage door began to lift. He stopped mid-sentence. The soft hum of the automatic door gave way to a moment of stunned silence, as the full contents of my 3-car garage revealed themselves under motion-activated lights. There, parked side by side, gleaming under spotless LED strips, sat a matte black Porsche 911 Turbo S, a deep blue McLaren GT, and a pearl white Tesla Model X Plaid. Each car clean, each one tuned, each one registered to me. Sean stared. I watched his mouth fall open slightly. His face changed in real time, first confusion, then disbelief, then a touch of something that looked like awe. He took a step forward, pointing at the Porsche. "Is that yours? All of them are." He turned to me like he didn't quite hear me right. You bought these?" I nodded. "I did. With what you run a tech startup barely." "No," I said calmly, "I own a multi-platform educational technology company. The nonprofit is just one arm of what I've built. What you see online. That's surface level. What you haven't asked about, that's the empire." He looked at me like I'd spoken another language. "I thought you were making, 30-40 grand a year?" "That's what you assumed," I said. "Because I didn't correct you. Because I didn't need to." I walked toward the McLaren and ran a hand lightly along the smooth carbon fiber. "I've been building this company for 8 years. While you were buying art for your loft, I was bootstrapping a digital platform for underfunded school districts. While you were posting rooftop brunches, I was writing grant code at 3 a.m. I've made more money in the last 2 years than your firm will see in the next 5. He blinked, struggling. But your car, the Focus." I smiled. "It's reliable. Low profile. It gets me to meetings without attracting the wrong kind of attention. I don't need to announce myself at every red light, Sean." He stared at the McLaren again. "But these are mine, not for show, for joy. I drive the Tesla when I travel cross-state to visit charter schools. The Porsche is for road trips. The McLaren, well, that one's just for me." He swallowed hard. "You don't get it," I said, stepping closer. "I didn't build all this to prove anything to you. I built it because I believe in the work, and because I figured out how to make that work profitable. Quietly, efficiently, without the country club." Sean looked around, absorbing every polished surface, every chrome detail, every choice I had made that didn't fit into the story he wrote for me. "But why didn't you ever say anything?" "Because you weren't listening," I replied. You never asked, you only lectured, and sometimes letting people talk is the best way to show them how little they know. He looked back toward the open garage door, then back at me. I don't know what to say. I tilted my head slightly. You don't have to say anything, Sean. Just follow me. There's more. His eyebrows lifted. There's more. I nodded once. You've only seen the garage. You haven't seen what I actually built. And as we turned toward the back of my property, toward the space he assumed was a guest house, but was something far more strategic, I realized this wasn't just a reveal. It was a reckoning. If you've ever let someone underestimate you on purpose just to watch them stumble over the truth later, stay with me, because this story isn't done yet, not by a long shot. From the outside, the structure looked like a modest guest house, single-level clean lines, nestled among trimmed hedges and mature trees. The kind of thing a typical suburban homeowner might add for in-laws or out-of-town friends. But this wasn't for guests. This was my headquarters. I walked ahead, badge in hand, and swiped it against the discreet panel by the steel-framed door. A soft beep. The lock released. Sean hesitated on the threshold. Wait, this is yours, this whole thing. I didn't answer right away. I just opened the door and let him step inside. The moment he did, his breath caught. The interior was nothing short of a private research facility. Triple monitor workstations lined one wall each, outfitted with custom development towers. A glass server room hummed in the corner, temperature controlled and glowing faintly blue. The floors were polished concrete, the walls a minimalist combination of white acoustic panels and floating screens. Whiteboards were covered in diagrams, code structures, and user analytics. On the far end, a small studio space housed a camera rig and green screen setup for virtual demos and investor presentations. Sean did a full 360. What is this? This, I said, is where the real work happens. He ran his hand along the edge of a marble-topped console desk. This looks like something out of Google. I gave a small nod. It's my private development center. I call it Core 1. I built it 3 years ago after we crossed the 7-figure revenue mark. 7 figures, he repeated like the words were foreign. We started with digital literacy modules for rural schools, then expanded into adaptive learning software, then platform integration for charter systems. Now we service over 1,000 school districts and about 30 private clients. This lab is where we prototype updates before rolling them into the cloud infrastructure. Sean turned slowly to face me. You built all this in secret. Not in secret, just without announcement. I gestured around. While you were critiquing my focus, I was hiring engineers and testing AI tutors. While you were wondering if I'd ever Thanham grow up Thanham, I was finalizing a 3-year federal grant to expand this platform nationally. He pointed at the wall behind me. Those patents? I followed his gaze. 7 frame certificates lined the wall. Patents, trademarks, and federal awards. One's for our adaptive learning algorithm. The others cover back-end architecture and engagement analytics. We were also given a Department of Education Innovation Award last spring. Sean moved toward them, slowly reading each plaque like it might bite. You won a federal award? Yes, for equity-driven technology in low-income education systems. I let that sit in silence. This was the moment, the exact breath in time I had visualized during every painful family dinner, when all the condescension would meet the concrete evidence of how wrong they were. But standing there watching my brother, once the confident suit-wrapped symbol of success, go speechless in front of my server stack, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free, because I wasn't trying to impress him anymore. I had already outgrown his expectations. What does all this cost? He finally whispered. The build-out was just under $3.5 million. Hardware, networking, the smart climate system. And that's not counting the custom software licenses. He whistled low and sharp. All this behind your house. I smiled. Funny what you can do when you're not busy proving things to people. He looked at me, and for the first time in maybe a decade, I saw no mockery, no sarcasm, just awe. Quiet, stunned awe. I don't know how I missed all this, he murmured. You weren't looking, I said softly. You were too busy making judgments to ask real questions. And as the glow from the monitors lit up his stunned face, I realized something else. I didn't need this moment to feel validated. Because building something that matters, that's the real flex. And I had been flexing in silence the entire time. Sean stood in the center of my development facility like a man who'd stumbled into a parallel universe. His hands hovered near the workstations, careful not to touch anything, like he might break a reality he wasn't ready to admit was real. I walked over to a nearby terminal, tapped a few keys, and brought up the live analytics dashboard. The wall-length monitor lit up with charts, graphs, and real-time data flows. Rows of users, server traffic, engagement scores, performance indexes all updating by the second. These are our current active deployments, I said, my voice calm. Right now, there are 1.3 million students using our platform in 47 states and 18 countries. Today alone, we'll clear just under $300 in revenue, net. Sean's mouth opened, but no sound came. I continued. Our monthly average profit margin is 46%. We've been growing at a compound rate of 22% annually for the last 3 years. And yes, this company, my company, is fully bootstrapped. No venture capital, no loans. Every dollar reinvested from the ground up. He leaned heavily against the edge of a desk. But, Vanessa, this is insane. You were never this ambitious. I looked him straight in the eye. No, you just assumed I wasn't. He blinked. I thought you were running a nonprofit. I am. 3 of them, in fact. I brought up another window. The Outreach Collective Digital Uprise and Ignite Ed. Together they support over 15,000 underprivileged students annually with scholarships, hardware donations, and technology training. He glanced at the screen, scanning the figures. You fund all of that? Yes, with revenue from the main company. That way we're never reliant on unstable donors or shifting policy. Sean swallowed. So all that stuff you used to talk about. Bridging the education gap, tech equity, that wasn't just talk. It never was. For a long time, there was only the sound of the server fans humming in the background. Sean looked around again, slower this time. His eyes settled on a corner wall filled with framed thank you letters, some handwritten in crayon, some typed on school letterhead. Notes from principals, teachers, students. You changed lives, he said quietly. I nodded. I've never wanted anything else. He rubbed his forehead like he was trying to massage the years of misunderstanding out of his brain. So while we were laughing at your little projects, you were... what? Becoming a multimillionaire. Technically, yes, I said. Our current valuation is just under $100 million based on existing contracts and market analysis. Our net revenue last quarter was $21.4 million. I've got $31.7 million in liquid assets and another $18 million in our East Coast expansion fund. And before you ask, yes, it's all legal, audited, and scalable. Sean laughed then, but it wasn't the cruel kind I was used to. It was the startled, breathless kind. Like someone finally seeing color after a lifetime in grayscale. I can't believe we spent years telling you to get a real job, he whispered. I smiled faintly. You weren't wrong about working hard. You were just wrong about what success looks like. He nodded slowly, and that car, the Ford, it's practical, efficient, doesn't scream Target when I park in a school district's visitor lot. He looked toward the garage door where the 3 luxury cars were still quietly gleaming in the dark. But those, they're for the weekends, or moments like this. He laughed again, shaking his head. You really built all this, and never said a word. I met his gaze. I didn't need to. Because the people I was building it for, they don't care what I drive. They care what I deliver. He looked down quiet again, for once without defense. And in that moment I knew something had shifted, not just in his perception of me, but in how I finally saw myself. Not the underestimated sibling, not the quiet one, not the girl with the tin can car, but the woman who built an empire behind a garage door with nothing but code conviction and an unshakable sense of purpose. The silence between us was heavy, but not uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that comes after a tidal wave, when everything you thought was solid turns out to be sand. Sean slowly walked past the thank you letters, reading each one like it was a relic from a forgotten story, the story of a sister he never knew. Just then my phone buzzed. I glanced down and saw the name Dr. Elena Brooks, Harvard University. I held up a finger to Sean and answered, my voice shifting instantly into professional cadence. Dr. Brooks, it's Vanessa. Vanessa, excellent news, she said, her tone bright. The university board has approved the full rollout. We'll be implementing your platform across all graduate-level education and computer science programs starting next semester. That's incredible, I said already, opening the project dashboard on one of the wall monitors. What's the finalized contract value? $12.7 million over 4 years, she replied, with auto-renewal options based on performance benchmarks. I exhaled through a smile. We're honored. I'll begin customization with my dev team immediately. As I ended the call, I noticed Sean had moved closer, reading the caller ID off the screen. Harvard, he asked. As in the Harvard? I nodded. They just became our largest academic client. He let out a stunned breath like all the air had been knocked out of him. $12.7 million. Over 4 years, plus renewals. It than hams a conservative estimate. He turned to look at the monitors, which now displayed a cascading chart of institutional clients: Stanford, MIT, Princeton, Caltech, even some major state universities. How long have you had these contracts? Some for a year, some new. It took time to build trust. Education is a slow-moving sector. Sean stepped back and slumped onto the edge of one of the work tables, his hands resting on his knees. We all thought you went to a community college. I raised an eyebrow. I went to MIT, full academic scholarship, master's in computer science specialized in adaptive learning systems. His head dropped into his hands. We thought you were just figuring things out. I said, just not in the way you assumed. There was something almost heartbreaking about the way he looked at me now. Like he was trying to remember every dinner, every gathering, every throwaway comment, searching for clues he had missed. I never asked, he admitted. I just assumed that because you didn't talk about money, you didn't have any. That's the thing, I said, walking over to stand beside him. You all were so busy measuring success by the car I drove or the clothes I wore, you never once asked what I actually did with my days. He looked up at me, remorse written plain across his face. You've built something extraordinary, and we treated you like a failure. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I walked over to the touchscreen wall and pulled up our company's global user map. Colored dots lit up across continents, students currently online, engaging with lessons we designed, learning because of the platform I built. I wasn't looking for praise, I said quietly. I just wanted to be left alone to do the work. But when the people closest to you don't even try to understand it, that hurts more than silence. Sean stood slower this time, his posture different, humbled. And the focus, he asked again, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. It gets great mileage, plus it keeps expectations low, I replied with a shrug. He laughed genuinely this time. Then he looked around once more, taking in every glowing screen, every certificate, every inch of the lab. So what do we call this place again? Core 1, I said. It's where the future gets written. He nodded, still quiet, still adjusting. And somewhere in the space between realization and respect, I felt something I hadn't felt around him in years. Peace. Not because he finally approved of me, but because I no longer needed him to. I could feel it, something shifting in Sean as we stepped back out into the evening air. The sky had gone dark, and the subtle glow from the motion lights on the garage cast long shadows on the stone path. He walked slower now, like he was carrying something heavy. Not shame exactly, but the weight of perspective. We passed by the side of the house, and I noticed his eyes drifting toward the large window into my home office. I paused. Want to see where I run the company, I asked. He looked surprised. That wasn't it. I smiled. That was just development. This, I gestured toward the window, is command. We stepped inside and Sean froze again. 12 large monitors lined 3 separate workstations, each with specialized tasks, communications, analytics, design. In the corner, a floor-to-ceiling server rack hummed in perfect rhythm, cooled by a silent system built into the floor. The shelves were lined with binders, notebooks, and tech magazines. On the wall above it all hung a single framed quote, "Build quietly. Let success do the talking." Sean walked in slowly, his fingers grazing the edge of the central desk. This setup looks like a control room. It is, I said. Every contract, every user deployment, every performance metric flows through here. This is where I manage the back-end, monitor our live data, and oversee our remote teams. East Coast, West Coast, even overseas. He looked around again, then focused on the framed quote. "I think I get it now," he said. "You never needed to prove anything to us. You were already proving it, just not where we were looking." I sat down at the main desk and logged into the admin dashboard. "Want to see something else?" He nodded, still quiet. I pulled up the business overview. On one screen appeared the live daily revenue count, currently sitting at $288,000 and climbing. On the next, our multi-year contracts across clients, each tagged with value ranges. The third showed company holdings and operating funds. "You're making nearly $300,000 today," Sean asked, stunned. "Before midnight, yeah. That's about average. Our peak days can hit $500 or $1,000 depending on academic calendar cycles. And all of this came from your idea, your code." I nodded. The initial prototype was something I wrote in grad school. It's evolved since then, obviously. I've brought in better engineers, UX experts, and curriculum designers, but the core is still mine. He looked down, shaking his head slowly. "We thought you were just tinkering, playing with passion projects. We had no idea. I leaned back in my chair. That's the thing, Sean. You didn't ask. You assumed. Because I didn't lead with status or show off or talk in numbers at dinner. He looked at me again, more serious this time. I don't think I've ever felt this foolish in my life. I softened. It's not about that. It's about what we've all been taught to value. Shiny cars, big titles, public wins, but the real work. The work that changes lives. It's usually happening quietly behind closed doors on screens no one else is looking at. He gestured around the room. So why now? Why show me all this? I paused, then said, because tonight at the country club you humiliated me. Not because I needed your validation, but because you shouted your ignorance of who I am to the world. And I realized I've allowed it to go on too long. Tonight, I stopped letting you define me. The room fell quiet again. Then I added, and if you want to know the real reason I'm showing you this now, it's because I want you to see what a real legacy looks like. Sean stared at me. I thought I was building one. You were building a resume, I said gently. I'm building futures. He stepped back, nodding slowly and exhaled. So what comes next? I smiled. You haven't even seen the rest of the property. And if you've ever worked in silence while people laughed at your journey, tell me below, because maybe it's time they saw the whole picture too. Maybe it's time your silence roared louder than their applause. We stepped out of the house and into the backyard, the moonlight casting a cool silver across the lawn. Sean followed still, a step behind, still processing. I led him around the side path, past the garden I'd designed. Not for aesthetics, but for clarity. A quiet space where I often sat between Zoom calls and grant applications. At the back of the property stood a larger structure, modern and minimal, its silhouette almost camouflaged against the trees. It didn't look like part of a home. It looked like it belonged on a university campus or a tech campus in Palo Alto. Sean paused. Is this another lab? It's more than that, I said. This is where we build. I used a separate badge this time. The biometric panel scanned my palm and beeped softly. The heavy glass door slid open to reveal what I called Innovation West, our product R&D facility. This was where our most experimental work happened. Inside, the space opened into a 2-story atrium complete with an open mezzanine modular development stations, floor-to-ceiling whiteboards, covered in system diagrams and design notes, and a secure data hub in the far back corner. The air inside was chilled, not cold, perfect for preserving delicate processors and high-end prototype tech. In the center, 3 engineers sat quietly at workbenches, headphones on assembling hardware modules. Another team stood by a touchscreen wall reviewing the next software release timeline. Sean blinked. You have staff here, now. They work in shifts, I said. Some are full-time, others are contracted on innovation grants. This team's focused on AI-assisted curriculum modeling personalized pathways for neurodiverse learners. We're piloting it in New Mexico and parts of Georgia this fall. He looked around the room like he'd walked into NASA. And they all report to you. I sign their paychecks, but I trust them to lead. We walked slowly toward the back where a wall was covered in plaques and framed certificates. I watched Sean's eyes scan the names: Department of Education, National Science Foundation, White House STEM Council, Forbes. Next 100 Innovators Global Learning Technology Prize. These are yours, he whispered. I nodded. Some are team awards, some personal, but all from work done here. His fingers stopped at one frame, a photo of me standing next to the Secretary of Education, accepting a national award for adaptive education reform. You've done more in 5 years than most of us will do in 50, he said, voice low. I turned on the final screen our live business dashboard. Bright, clean visuals spread across it, user activity, client metrics, and bottom line numbers. Sean's eyes widened. Is that today's revenue? $293,000, and it's not even midnight yet. And these contracts, I tapped to expand the list. Active contracts, 1247 school districts, 89 Fortune 500 companies, and 12 government agencies. Total value over the next 5 years, $347 million. Pending proposals, $89 million. Renewals under negotiation, $156 million. He turned, stunned. You're telling me your company is worth just under $100 million depending on the market? He sank onto a nearby bench like the realization had physically hit him. And we were lecturing you about being a freelancer. I walked over to a secondary console, opened another application, and turned the screen toward him. This is our charitable division. Over the past 5 years, we've donated $18.7 million to educational initiatives, built 47 computer labs, provided 156 full college scholarships, and trained over 800 teachers in tech pedagogy. Sean blinked. 18.7, and no one knows. They're not supposed to, I said softly. It's not about recognition, it's about impact. He looked back at the glowing dashboards, the team still quietly working, and then at me. I don't even know what to say anymore. I sat beside him. You don't need to say anything, but if you're ready, I can show you what it means to build something that doesn't just make money, but makes meaning. He nodded slowly. I knew that look. It was the look of someone who'd spent his whole life climbing one ladder only to realize he'd propped it against the wrong wall. And if you've ever built something beautiful while no one was watching, drop a comment. Because you know the truth, not all success makes noise, and not all silence means failure. For the first time all night, Sean stopped trying to speak. He just sat there, shoulders slightly hunched, hands clasped between his knees, taking in everything. The data on the wall, the hum of the servers, the calm, focused energy of my team as they quietly pushed code that would impact thousands of students by morning. All of it. And he looked small. Not because I had made him feel that way, but because the world he thought he knew had just expanded far beyond his framework. I pulled up another dashboard and tapped into our impact metrics, the ones that mattered most to me. These numbers, I said, pointing to the screen, they're not just contracts. They're kids. He looked over, eyebrows pinched together. What do you mean? I zoomed into a region in Appalachia. See this cluster, 4 counties in Kentucky. Their schools didn't even have stable internet until 2 years ago. We partnered with a local nonprofit to deploy infrastructure, set up devices, and build custom curriculum that aligned with their state standards. The graduation rate has gone up 14% since then. I slid the map westward. Here's Albuquerque. We launched an AI-assisted reading intervention program there for 4th graders. Literacy rates rose by nearly a full grade level in 8 months. Then I scrolled through our scholarship dashboard. And these are the 156 students who received full college rides from our Future Builder initiative. Some are at state schools. Others are at MIT, Stanford, Cornell. Kids whose parents never finished high school, now writing code, designing hardware, launching robotics teams. Sean leaned forward, eyes locked on the screen. I've never even heard of this program, he said quietly. You wouldn't, I replied, because I didn't name it after myself. Because I wasn't trying to make headlines. I was trying to make sure these kids had a chance. He looked over at me, then not with the defensive edge I was so used to, but with something closer to reverence. And you did all of this, without any help. I gave a half smile. Not without help. I had a mentor in grad school who pushed me. I had teachers who believed in me when no one else did. And I had grit. But no family connections. No insider funding. No corporate handouts. Just belief. In the mission. In the students. And in myself. He exhaled like he'd been holding his breath the entire evening. Vanessa, he said, you didn't just build a company. You built a movement. Those words sat with me. Because they were true. What I had created wasn't just profitable, it was transformative. For students, for schools, for how we think about equity in education. And for the first time, my brother saw it. He looked around again, eyes scanning every detail, then settled back on me. We've been so wrong about you, he said, voice rough. We joked, mocked, dismissed everything you said. And while we were busy polishing our resumes, you were out here changing the landscape. I know, I said softly. I don't even know how to apologize. You don't have to fix the past, I told him. But you do have to stop measuring people by what they drive, or what parties they're invited to, or how they dress. Because if success only looks like a penthouse and a Porsche, then youth and Hamra missing 99% of what actually matters. He nodded, staring down at his hands. And we've missed it for years. I watched him, wondering how many other people out there were carrying silent revolutions in plain sight, dismissed because they didn't look the part, because they chose meaning over optics, because they weren't loud about what they were building. How many of them sit at family dinners like I used to, shrinking to survive, biting their tongue, holding back truths no one cared to hear? I built this company for them too, not just for the kids, not just for the schools, but for the quiet warriors building in silence, for the underestimated, the unseen, the ones who stopped needing applause and started making impact. If you're one of them, If you've been written off just because your journey didn't come with a spotlight, leave a note. You're not alone. And your work matters more than they'll ever know. By the time we returned to the house, the sky had turned to deep indigo and the porch lights had automatically flicked on, casting a soft glow across the quiet yard. Sean walked ahead of me this time, slower, not from exhaustion but reverence. His usual swagger had drained away, replaced by something quieter. Humbled, he paused by the open garage, glancing again at the 3 cars parked like guardians of a truth he had refused to see for so long. "You paid cash for all of them?" he asked, not with awe, but almost disbelief. I nodded. "I don't believe in financing luxury. If I can't afford it outright, I don't buy it." He gave a half laugh, the sound of someone grappling with a brand new worldview. God, I took out a 5-year lease on mine. And here I thought I was ahead. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. He turned to face me fully for the first time since we'd walked out of that club. "Vanessa, we owe you the biggest apology of our lives." "You don't owe me anything," I said simply. "Yes, we do," he insisted. "We talked about you like you were a burden, a dreamer, someone who never quite got it together. And the truth is, we were just too narrow to understand you." I looked at him long and steady. "It's not just about me, Sean. You've treated a lot of people like that. Anyone who didn't measure up to your version of success, people who weren't loud or polished or playing your game. You didn't just miss me, you missed what I stood for." He looked down, ashamed. I continued. "It's easier to judge someone than ask what keeps them up at night. You all never once asked what my goals were, what I was building toward. I spent years walking into rooms where my presence was tolerated, but my worth was assumed non-existent." He nodded slowly. "I see that now." "No, Sean, you're starting to see. The real question is, what are you going to do with that?" He was quiet for a long time. Then he pulled out his phone. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Texting Victoria," he said. "She sent me a message earlier asking if I finished explaining to you why you need to get your life together. I think it's time she hears a different version of the story." He showed me the message he typed. "You'll want to sit down before you talk to Vanessa again. You don't know anything about the life she's built, but you should." I didn't either, until tonight. I didn't smile, but I did feel something loosen inside me. Not triumph, just relief, like something long buried had finally been acknowledged. My phone buzzed again, this time from my CFO, Janet. "Hey, just wrapped up Q4, her voice said when I answered. "Final revenue for the quarter, $21.4 million, net profit, $12.8 million. We're closing out the year, up 43%. "Perfect," I replied. "Go ahead and authorize the East Coast facility. Boston's ready." Sean's jaw dropped. "You're opening another center. Boston will be our 3rd major hub," I said. "East Coast academic access, Ivy League support. We already own the property." He looked like he'd just stepped out of a time machine. "You're operating with tens of millions in cash, like operational cash." I nodded. "You see, Sean, I've spent the last decade building resilience, not just revenue. I've weathered policy shifts, funding freezes, economic downturns. Because what I do isn't fragile, it's grounded." He walked slowly to the front steps and sat down, head tilted toward the sky like he didn't know which way was up anymore. "Vanessa," he said softly, "how can we ever make this up to you?" I looked at him, not with anger, but a calm that comes from closure. "Start by changing how you see people. Stop assuming the loudest voice in the room is the smartest. Stop confusing confidence for competence. And maybe start listening." He nodded, eyes glistening. "I will. And if you've ever been asked to prove your worth to someone who never saw you clearly, just remember you don't owe them proof, you owe yourself peace. Let them catch up in their own time. You keep building." The next morning, I woke up to a string of missed calls and unread messages. "Victoria, Mom, Dad, all ringing, all texting, all asking for some version of the same thing. Can we talk?" Apparently, Sean had wasted no time after leaving my house. I imagined him driving home in silence, the sound of his Porsche suddenly feeling hollow. I imagined him walking into his high-rise condo, staring at his floor-to-ceiling windows that once symbolized status, but now just reflected back how much he hadn't seen. And then I imagined him doing the one thing he rarely did, telling the truth. I didn't respond to any of them. Not yet. Instead, I made coffee and sat by my garden window watching the morning light sweep across the pavers. I could hear the hum of the house powering up servers kicking on the AC and the lab regulating temperature notifications pinging softly from my dashboard. It was business as usual, except everything had changed. Because for the first time in years, the people who judged me without ever asking a single meaningful question had been confronted by the full weight of their own blindness. And I hadn't lifted a finger to defend myself. I'd simply let them see. That's what people misunderstand about silence. It's not always weakness. Sometimes it's the strategy of someone who knows that the truth will arrive on its own. And when it does, it doesn't knock, it kicks down the door. Later that day, I finally called my parents. My mother's voice trembled the moment she picked up. Vanessa, your brother told us about everything, about the contracts, the schools, the labs, the cars, Harvard. There was a pause. We had no idea, she whispered. I know, I said calmly. You didn't ask. My father's voice came on next. We thought we were helping you, pushing you to be better. No, I replied. You were pushing me to be like you. That's not the same thing. He was quiet. I continued. I've never needed you to approve of my path. I just needed you to believe I was worth asking about. My mom sniffled. We're sorry. I know, I said. We want to see everything, she added, when you're ready. The real work, the people you've helped, your company. Maybe, I said, then added gently, but not until you stop seeing me as the exception and start seeing that success doesn't always wear a suit. That night, I sat alone in my office with the monitors glowing gently behind me. I opened the analytics dashboard and watched students log in, begin their lessons, submit progress updates. Real kids, real teachers, real lives changed by something they'd never know my family once thought was a hobby. It made me think about all the others out there, people working late, building, slowly dreaming in silence. People who don't get invited to sit at the grown-up table because their lives don't come with country club badges or designer tags. And to those people, if Youth Humry reading this, if Youth Humry nodding silently right now, you are not less, you are not behind. You are doing something they may not understand, and that is not your problem. It's theirs. You get to decide what matters. You get to define success on your own terms, not theirs, not society's, yours. And sometimes the best thing you can do is keep driving that old car, walking into rooms where no one claps for you, and quietly building something that one day, without warning, makes the world stop and look. Because by then, you won't need their applause. Your work will speak louder than they ever did. If you've ever chosen substance over performance, meaning over visibility, or purpose over prestige, tell me in the comments. Because you're not alone. And some of us, we were never meant to blend in. We were meant to build quietly, until no one could ignore it anymore. A few weeks later, I got an invitation. It wasn't from a venture capital firm. It wasn't from a university or a think tank. It was from my sister Victoria, the same sister who once rolled her eyes at my job. The one who had made offhand comments like, maybe one day you'll get a real career. The one who had invited me to networking events just to laugh about my outfit choices. Now she wanted to meet for coffee. No agenda, no forced pretense, just coffee. I sat across from her at a downtown cafe, the kind where everyone types on MacBooks and judges each other's shoes. She looked nervous, like she'd rehearsed something in her car but already forgotten half of it. I just wanted to say, she started, then trailed off, eyes darting toward the pastry display. I waited. That I've been awful to you, she said finally. For years. That caught my attention. Victoria never apologized, not sincerely, not without 100 qualifiers. But there she was, staring down her latte like it held the answers she never bothered asking me for. I didn't understand what you were doing, she continued. You were always so focused, but so quiet about it. I thought that meant you were struggling or hiding. But now I see you weren't trying to impress anyone. You were building something real. I sipped my coffee. Why now? She looked up. Because Sean told us. And I did my own digging. I watched interviews you gave, read some articles, Googled your name, and I mean really Googled. And I found things I didn't expect. Schools named after your program. Kids in tears thanking your team. A video of a student at Harvard saying your platform saved his life. I didn't interrupt. I let her carry the weight of what she was finally seeing. I was jealous, she admitted. You never needed the approval I lived off of. You weren't playing the same game. And I thought that made you less, when really it made you more. I leaned forward. Do you understand now that all those years I didn't show off, it wasn't because I had nothing, It was because I had something sacred. She nodded, and I trampled it, because it didn't come wrapped in the kind of success I understood. There it was, the truth we had never spoken out loud. You don't need to beg for forgiveness, I told her. But if we're going to have a relationship again, it has to be on different terms. I don't want to be tolerated. I don't want to be invited just so you can say you included me. She nodded again slowly this time. Then what do you want? I want to be seen, fully, quiet success and all. She took a breath. Okay, then I want to start over. I looked at her for a long moment before answering. Start by listening, really listening. That afternoon, I walked away feeling something I hadn't in a long time when it came to family peace. Not because everything was fixed, but because I had finally spoken from a place of self-trust. I didn't need them to believe in me anymore, because I believed in myself, fully, fiercely, finally. In the weeks that followed, small things changed. My mom sent me an article on one of our scholarship winners. My dad asked if I'd consult on a board he was joining for a local education nonprofit. And Sean, he forwarded me a proposal to partner with his financial firm to help fund education tech in underserved communities. I didn't say yes right away, but I did say let's talk, because grace doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing what you'll carry forward and what you'll finally set down. And for anyone reading this, still waiting for your family to recognize your worth, still shrinking in rooms that don't see your light, hear me. You are not small. You are not invisible. You are not behind. You are building something bigger than applause. And one day the people who doubted you will have no choice but to sit down, look you in the eye, and say the words they never thought they'd say, we were wrong. When that day comes, you won't need their validation, but it will feel good to finally hear it. That night, as the house settled into silence and the last email was sent, I walked out onto my back porch. The city was quiet beneath a velvet sky, and for the first time in years, I let myself breathe, really breathe. The war I had been fighting wasn't just about proving my worth. It was about holding on to myself when everything around me told me I wasn't enough. When family dinners left me feeling small. When my silence was mistaken for failure. When being different meant being dismissed. But I had built a life on substance, not spectacle. Impact, not image. And no matter how late they were to recognize it, they were now looking in my direction, not because I shouted, but because the truth eventually rises. And when it does not need to be explained. It simply stands. I thought about every quiet soul out there like me. Those who are overlooked, underestimated, or made to feel like their quiet path isn't worthy of praise. And I want to say this clearly, boldly. You do not owe the world a performance. You do not need to prove your value with noise. You are not here to win their games. You are here to build your own world. One day they'll ask how you did it, how you survived their dismissal, how you kept going. And the answer will be simple, because I never stopped believing in the work even when they didn't believe in me. I turned off the lights, locked up the house, and walked into my quiet, powerful future. Not with vengeance, but with vision. And that was always the plan. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or made to feel invisible, this story is for you. Drop a comment if you've been there. Like, subscribe, and share if you believe quiet strength is the loudest proof. And remember, some of us were never meant to follow. We were born to lead quietly, completely, and on our own terms.